Our third problem scenario concerns the common foreign and security policy and external relations of the EU, and in many respects is more concerned with the procedures involved in decision-making in the EU rather than the substance of EU law. So if you like some of the procedural aspects, then this might be one for you in particular. As ever, you've got a couple of different pieces of information. You've got an email and you've got a news article, although that is really just to provide a little bit of background. There are 4 issues arising from this email. The first is whether or not the EU can adopt a common policy on recognising the government of El Cid. I think the key thing in answering this problem scenario is to ensure that you have in particular the Treaty and European Union open in front of you, in particular Title 5. So take a look for the relevant treaty article that provides for the legal basis for the common foreign and security policy. Look at which institutions are involved in the procedures for decision making, and then crucially think about what the voting requirements are. Think also about other issues that could arise. For example, who can actually bring this proposal to the relevant institution, and can it be challenged before the Court of Justice? There's a key line in one of the treaty articles, in Article 50, that explains this exactly. The second issue is this no-fly zone. Again, take a look at our key treaty article, which in particular Article 21 of the Treaty and European Union. Look also at Article 42 and Article 43 in particular, and decide for yourself whether or not you think the EU can act on the basis of these articles. Then again, look at the procedure for decision making. Think also about whether this can be challenged before the Court of Justice, and you might want to do a little bit of research about the types of action the EU has undertaken before and make an assessment as to whether or not it's likely the EU would go so far as agreeing to this type of action. The third issue is sanctions, which has a very specific legal basis in the treaties. So look for that very specific legal basis for sanctions. Again, think about who can bring forward a proposal for sanctions, and think about whether or not they can be challenged before the Court of Justice. Again, there's a slightly different rule for sanctions as compared to the rest of the common foreign security policy, so make sure that you identify that slight variation. And there is some relevant case law around sanctions as well. I briefly considered one in the lectures, but there's quite a bit more that you may want to look at. So the issue of sanctions in particular is one in which you might want to do a bit of reading and a bit of research, because there is, it's one area in which there is case law that you could potentially cite here. Finally, trade agreements with Algebia's neighbours. This is somewhat different to the rest of the common foreign security policy, so explain the legal basis on which the EU engages in external relations with respect to trade agreements. The decision making is different institutions are involved, the voting requirements are different, so again, make sure that you explain that clearly following the steps on your worksheet. If you do all that, again, in a methodical way, citing in particular the treaty articles are very, very important for this particular case study, and making sure that you cite some of the relevant case law where appropriate, but it's mostly treaty articles for this one. If you do that in a very clear and structured and methodical way, again, you should be fine.